Okay, so you're probably going to be tired of hearing me say this, but I can't say it enough. To manage weeds in this pasture, the best way of doing this is to maintain these grasses so they're nice and thick and weed seeds just can't get a chance to get started. All right, and this is a good example of a pasture like that that's been taken care of for the most part. Okay? So what's the first thing I should do to keep these pasture grasses really healthy? This is my farm. I walked out here and I was actually very surprised to see, and we're going to talk about evaluating pastures later, but to see how much difference there is in grasses like this that's thick and healthy and green, twice as tall, twice as big as the grass right next to it. And I can tell you that's not because the horses ate that and didn't eat this. They tend not to eat this area a whole lot. What this is telling me is that I need to do a soil test, because this area probably had more manure from the horses. And it's telling me that these grasses need manure. They probably need the extra nitrogen. They need phosphorus, potash. So I'm going to, in the next couple of weeks or early spring, go to my Penn State Extension office and pick up a soil test kit. And the soil test kit I will use to send soil out to Penn State. The directions are all there, how to collect the soil, what they're looking for. All you have to do is collect soil, following their directions, put it in the mailer, and drop it in the mail. You will receive back from Penn State 3 years of information about how to take care of your pasture grasses. They will tell you what your pH is, if you need lime, if you need nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. That's really critical. I've been on fields where someone had reseeded a pasture and 4 years later the plants were only about 2 inches tall. The pH was incredibly acid. The plants just couldn't get enough nutrients. And the State College area, you're going to find there's a lot of limestone and the pH is fairly neutral. Up here, I'm in the mountains. It's very acid soil here. I can't guess what these pastures need, but I can invest the money, which is not that much, all right, to figure out, have Penn State give me an analysis of what's here and what I need to do for the next 3 years. So I encourage you to do that. Check your soil. Okay, the other thing that coming out here and walking my pasture showed me is the importance of rotation. If you look at how tall this grass is, it's a manure area so the horses don't graze it. What they do is primarily graze here. We know that pasture grasses store their energy below the ground or in the bottom. The carbohydrate content is in the lowest part of this plant. So animals will continually seek out that highly nutritious, low fiber, high carbohydrate grass. Had I left animals in here, this could easily have become all bare ground because they would have grazed here till they destroyed those pasture grasses, ate the sugar levels out, taken the energy away from the grasses so they couldn't regrow. So what I've done is I've taken the animals and put them in a pasture nearby. Now, I don't do intensive rotation, but a lot of farmers do, which is highly effective, where the animals are kept in an area and allowed to eat until the grass dictates it's time to move them on to the next paddock. But I do rotation in that every group of horses has 2 to 3 pastures that I can move them back and forth between and allow this grass time to regrow, and that's really important. So I really highly encourage you to think about resting these grasses and rotating. If you don't, you will eliminate these pasture grasses from your pasture. Another management practices you may want to adopt is to think about removing animals from a pasture during periods of very adverse conditions. I said earlier, all these grasses here are cool season. They won't grow in hot, dry summers. I find that people think weeds magically appeared when they don't. But you notice them in the summertime when the grasses have been grazed down and the weeds love that hot, dry weather and just keep right on growing. If you can't rotate, or you're walking your pastures and you see, wow, the quality of the grass is just not good, it's suffering from overgrazing, NRCS can help you engineer what we call an animal concentration area or a heavy use area. And they're created to provide minimal damage to the environment. So they're engineered to have a stone base and a crushed stone surface so the animals can stay there, still be outside, be fed hay, grain, move around, breathe fresh air during periods that the grass simply can't grow. If you graze grasses, when it can't grow, it has nothing to do but give up and die. So it's really important at certain points in bad weather conditions to keep the animals off of the pastures. Okay, another strategy to make your pastures better is renovation. Renovation means that you've got enough justification to go in and try to reseed pasture forages to try to have more successful growth of your pasture grasses. Renovation can be done a variety of ways, but the important thing to think about is you have to have contact between the seed and the soil, at least 1/4 of an inch. Just broadcasting seed on the surface of bare ground rarely causes enough moisture and enough soil fertility to help those seeds develop into plants. There is a piece of equipment that many places will rent. You can purchase if you're big enough, but it's called a no-till drill. And there are no-till drills that have been developed for pastures so they can fit through relatively small gates. What the no-till drill does is it cuts a slit in the ground, drops a seed, and covers it over with 1/4 of an inch of soil. And it's amazing, it's wonderful. You will see rows of new pasture grasses start to grow as soon as you get adequate moisture. Looks like a miniature cornfield with rows of pasture grasses. Great way to renovate. So when's the best time to do this? Most successful renovations occur in late summer, early fall. And that's because we tend to get a lot of moisture in September and October, causing the seeds to germinate, the little plants to start to grow, and the little plants actually send out roots that continue to grow all winter long, so those plants are ready to pop out of the ground and grow like crazy in the springtime. So if you want a successful renovation, having a little patience and waiting till late summer, early fall is probably your best bet. Okay, so one thing about renovation that I should add is before you decide to do this and put out the expense of the proper fertility and all the pasture grasses, you need to understand that animals need to be taken off of that pasture until the grass is at least 5 to 6 inches tall. Most universities will recommend a better than a year because you need adequate root growth or those animals are just going to pull those new plants right out of the ground. So it is a commitment. To decide to renovate a pasture, you need to know where you're going to put those animals and protect those new seedlings. So there's a lot to pasture management, as you can see, and we're not finished yet. All right. Another strategy is mowing, because mowing can clip off some of the weed seed heads and prevent these seeds from germinating in your pasture. But you have to be careful that you don't mow so close to the ground that you're hurting the grasses and taking away their food reserves. Generally speaking, if we have orchard grass like this taller grass, this orchard grass, if we have orchard grass that tends to get pretty tall, we don't want to mow that any lower than 5 to 6 inches, and we probably want to leave it grow to about 5 to 7 inches before we mow it. Any shorter will cut into the food reserves of that plant. If you have primarily the little tiny fine grass like this Kentucky bluegrass over here, that you can mow to 3 to 5 inches. It stores energy under the ground, so it can tolerate more intensive mowing. But don't take beautiful healthy grass like this and mow it too short just to eliminate some of the weeds. All right, if nothing else is working for you and you have persistent weeds that are truly a problem, considerations may be given to use an herbicide to eliminate the weeds. But I have to tell you, there's a lot of thought that has to go into that decision. Using herbicides alone is not a solution. You'll kill the weed that's causing a problem for you and create a bare spot. What's going to fill in that bare spot? Probably more weeds. Maybe the same kind, maybe something different that's more problematic. If you're planning on using an herbicide, you really need to address the problem that caused those weeds to grow there. That would be an important consideration. Herbicides are not easy. I said you have to learn to love identifying weeds. So the Penn State Agronomy Guide is something you can access online or you can purchase. It's fantastic. The Penn State Agronomy Guide has a table that lists all of the major pasture weeds in Pennsylvania and lists all the herbicides that are available to manage them and ranks them as to how effective they are. The ranking system is like 6 to approximately 10. And you'll see some that say N, no control. You have to know what the weed is you're trying to control, or you're wasting your money and using herbicides unnecessarily. You have to know that that particular herbicide is capable of eliminating that weed that you want out of your pasture. And that table is just fantastic at helping you make that decision. The other thing that's important is the agronomy guide will have information about all those different herbicides. Many of them have grazing restrictions. You can't put animals back until several days after you use that herbicide. They also have replant considerations. Some of the herbicides you can't plant grass after you use it. It will kill the new seedlings. And one of the most important things that we kind of found out the hard way is that some of these herbicides travel through the animal intact and are present in the manure. So if your neighbor has a garden and you've used the wrong herbicide and it's in that manure and you nicely give them your manure, you will kill all their tomato plants and their broadleaf crops. If a farmer uses it on his field, on soybeans, he may have an issue with it. So you have to follow all of these restrictions very, very carefully. There are timing for each one of these products and how soon after you treat a pasture you can use the manure or return the animals from that pasture. All right, so I don't necessarily think herbicides are a bad solution, but they're not a long-term solution without adopting one of the practices that we talked about previously.